The lights were warm and bright, the applause loud and energetic as Mark Wahlberg walked onto the stage of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Wearing a crisp navy suit and a charming smile, he shook hands with the host and waved to the audience. Like any other night, the studio was full. The energy was high. Wahlberg had come to promote his latest film, Crimson, Valora gritty war drama inspired by a real U.S. military mission. Supposed to be a fun night. Little after. A few stories, a teaser trailer, then out. Stephen Colbert welcomed him with his usual mix of wit and warmth. The first few minutes were easy. They joked about Wahlberg's 4 a.m. workouts, his 5 kids, and how he once sold sneakers before becoming a movie star. The audience laughed. Wahlberg laughed. Everything felt scripted, relaxed, exactly as planned. But something wasn't quite, right? Colbert looked at his cue cards, paused, and shifted in his seat. Then came the question, delivered casually, but with a sharp undertone. Your new film covers a covert military operation. It's intense, emotional, ... But some critics say it glorifies violence. Do you think Hollywood has a responsibility to show the consequences of war? There was a small silence, 2 seconds too long. Wahlberg's smile faded. His jaw tightened. He looked directly at Colbert, and his voice dropped half an octave. With all due respect, Stephen, he said slowly, I don't need a lecture on what responsibility looks like. The studio went quiet. Colbert blinked, confused. I didn't mean. Wahlberg interrupted. You sit behind a desk and tell jokes about things I've actually seen. I lived what your government tried to cover up. The crowd didn't laugh. No one clapped. Even the camera operators looked at each other. Colbert's face changed. His friendly expression froze, as if trying to decide whether to steer the moment back into safe territory or dive deeper. I'm not sure what you mean, Colbert said carefully. Are you saying you were involved in something the government? Yes, Wahlberg said firmly. Operation Jericho. 2004, Afghanistan. You ever heard of it? Colbert said nothing. There was no reference card for that. No cue card. No joke ready. You won't find it in books or headlines, Wahlberg continued. Because the story was buried. We filmed a documentary embedded with a special unit. It was supposed to be for a film project, but the mission went south. Civilians died. We were told to shut up, pack up, and disappear. A loud cough broke the silence from somewhere in the crowd. Colbert leaned forward, voice lower. You're saying the U.S. military let you witness a classified operation? I'm saying, Wahlberg replied, they used us. The footage never aired. I signed an NDA so heavy my legal team didn't even get a full copy. But now they're selling it back to us as fiction. Colbert tapped his earpiece. Producers were shouting something in his ear. He waved them off. Mark, he said, are you suggesting the government used a Hollywood production to cover up a real mission gone wrong? I'm not suggesting, Wahlberg said. I'm confirming. Colbert turned toward the camera. We'll be right back, he said quickly, forcing a smile. The screen faded to black. Behind the scenes, chaos broke out. Wahlberg stood up, tossed his mic to the floor, and walked off stage. A producer rushed to Colbert's side and whispered something. Colbert's face went pale. Wahlberg was escorted by 2 staffers toward a private exit. Paparazzi outside the studio had already caught wind of the commotion. A single photo Wahlberg mid-stride, eyes locked on the ground, jaw clenched would go viral within minutes. Back inside the studio, Colbert sat silently at his desk. The live audience didn't know what to do. Applause signs flashed, but few clapped. The tension hadn't left the room. Someone in the front row whispered, "Did?" He just confessed to a military cover-up. 10 minutes later, social media exploded. Hashtag Wahlberg leaks, hashtag Colbert cut, hashtag Operation Jericho, clips of the interview, recorded by audience members on their phones, were already online before the network's official broadcast could be edited. Wahlberg's statement, "I lived what your government," Covered up, played on a loop across Twitter, Reddit, and Telegram. Some called him a hero. Others said he had snapped. But in the shadows of government buildings and newsrooms, a different kind of panic set in. Because somewhere, buried deep, in the Pentagon's classified archives was a single folder marked Jericho. And someone had just said its name on national television. The clip had been online for less than an hour. And already 3 government agencies were flagged by their own internal monitors. The phrase Operation Jericho was not meant to exist. In the public domain, it was designed to be unsearchable. But now it was trending at #1 worldwide. Inside a quiet room at Langley, Virginia, a CIA systems analyst stared at the screen. The transcript was clear. Mark Wahlberg had said the words on camera under lights, with millions watching. At first, many thought it was just theater, a viral publicity stunt. But the energy online shifted when former military contractors began commenting vaguely at first, then more directly. One tweet read, "If you know, you know. Jericho was real. I was there. He's not lying." The account was suspended in minutes. By morning, Wahlberg had vanished. His publicist told reporters he had left town for a family emergency. But several paparazzi who tried following his car lost it just outside Yonkers. The vehicle turned off the highway, went through a tunnel, and never re-emerged on traffic cams. It was as if he'd disappeared. Some said he'd been taken into protective custody. Others claimed he was being silenced. Stephen Colbert didn't return to his show that night. A guest host filled in, reading off a tightly worded statement. Last night's interview included unscheduled remarks that do not reflect the views of this program or network. No mention of Wahlberg. No mention of Jericho. But silence only fueled the fire. Independent journalists began digging. An old Reddit thread from 2011 resurfaced, written by a user claiming to have worked on a scrapped military documentary crossover project in Afghanistan. The post described a mission that matched Wahlberg's story almost exactly: a remote valley. Civilians caught in a drone crossfire, and American forces retreating after a supposed equipment failure. The post was originally ignored. It was evidence. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, a former assistant editor from a small production house went public. She claimed that in 2005, she'd worked on a film labeled Desert Documentary B-roll under heavy supervision. The footage was raw, disturbing, and included brief frames of Wahlberg on location, wearing military-grade gear. "We were told to log it and delete it," she said in a video interview. They said the project had been killed due to political sensitivities, but I remember seeing local children in those clip scans, terrified. Then I never saw those drives again. The interview went viral within hours. Journalists demanded answers from the Department of Defense. The Pentagon spokesperson offered a sterile response. "We have no knowledge of any unauthorized civilian involvement in active military operations." But that wasn't the end of it. That same day, a leak appeared on an encrypted forum frequented by whistleblowers and military insiders. The post included a redacted mission log titled Echo 4, Jericho, with timestamps, call signs, and casualty reports. Though heavily censored, one thing stood out: a listed civilian observer VIP waiver approved by Dodd Films Division. The initials next to it, MW, back in New York. Security was increased outside CBS headquarters. Inside, producers on Colbert's team were called into private meetings. One assistant editor was placed on administrative leave. Another, who had tried to leak the full footage to a news outlet, was reportedly escorted out of the building by men in plain suits. The original interview segment was never rebroadcast. Instead, sanitized versions with selective editing appeared. Wahlberg's statement about living what your government covered up was removed. The audience's stunned silence was replaced with canned laughter. It felt eerie manufactured. Viewers noticed screenshots comparing the raw audience videos, with the network version flooded social media. "You're not crazy. One user posted, "They really edited the past." A new hashtag emerged. Hashtag what is Jericho by now? Other names began to surface: journalists who had disappeared while investigating war zone footage. Veterans who'd hinted at hidden operations before going quiet. Wahlberg had cracked something open. He hadn't just exposed a single mission. It exposed the fact that the truth was being managed. Some lawmakers demanded a hearing. A congressman from Oregon submitted a formal inquiry into whether American citizens had ever been embedded into military ops without proper classification. He was mocked by mainstream media until his office received a flash drive in the mail. Inside, it was silent drone footage of a desert convoy. The file was titled Jericho-clip-5.mov. It showed what appeared to be a small village. Children running. Armed men shouting. Then a flash, then fire. A figure could be seen briefly in the chaos. He wore a helmet, a vest, and he looked just like Mark Wahlberg. That night, a single tweet from Wahlberg's dormant account appeared. No text. Just an old photo of him with his arm around a young Afghan boy, both smiling. The tweet vanished within 60 seconds. But 60 seconds was enough. Someone had screenshot it. The caption they added was simple. He didn't play the role. He lived it. The Pentagon's press room was unusually crowded. A row of cameras lined the back wall. Reporters whispered to each other, scrolling their phones as more leaks trickled online. The spokesperson took the podium, looking calm but tired, his suit pressed too neatly, his words practiced. "There is no operation named Jericho in any official Department of Defense records," he said. "We have no further comment at this time." But everyone in the room knew that wasn't true, because less than an hour earlier, The Guardian had published 3 blurry stills from a 2004 reconnaissance video. They showed what looked like a firefight on a rocky hillside. Smoke filled the frame. In the bottom left corner, a man could be seen crouching beside U.S. soldiers, his face half obscured, but unmistakable. Mark Wahlberg. The photo analysis had been verified by 3 independent sources. The internet was exploding. On Capitol Hill, Congresswoman Alina Ruiz called for an emergency inquiry. If a private citizen, especially a Hollywood figure, was used to cover up a Black Ops mission, that's not just unethical. That's treasonous manipulation of both our military and our media. By the afternoon, an internal Pentagon memo leaked. It referenced ECHO personnel compliance for 2B, a clause that allowed for civilian embeds under film study protocols in politically sensitive territories. The memo was dated June 2004. Wahlberg's name was redacted, but the initials MW appeared again, listed as part of a joint mission team codenamed Lancer Red. Suddenly, the press stopped treating Wahlberg like a celebrity. He became a case, a threat. Back in Los Angeles, Wahlberg's former agent appeared on a small podcast. She looked uneasy. "Mark called me once, years ago," she said. "It was the middle of the night. He told me something had gone wrong during filming overseas. He said people died. Said he couldn't sleep." The host leaned in. "Did he ever mention Jericho?" She paused. "No, but he said one word I'll never forget. He said, they told me my job was to forget." That quote went viral in less than 10 minutes. Across military forums, more veterans stepped forward. A former Army drone operator posted anonymously, "Jericho was real. We were tracking hostiles near the Pakistan border, but the coordinates we were given led us straight to a village. Command said it was a glitch, but we all knew it wasn't." One day later, satellite imagery from 2004 was released by a Norwegian data firm. It showed a rural Afghan village flattened. The blast radius suggested a drone strike. U.S. media tried to downplay it. European outlets did not. German and French news anchors questioned whether the mission violated NATO rules. The French foreign minister demanded clarity. Did the United States use film actors to justify or obscure military operations? Silence. Meanwhile, back in New York, Colbert was under intense pressure. His staff had been called in for legal review. The network issued a vague defense. The show remains committed to journalistic integrity and humor, but internally, producers were shaken. One intern confessed to a journalist that Colbert had been warned before the Wahlberg interview to avoid pressing too far on military topics. Then why did he ask? The journalist replied. The intern shrugged. Maybe he didn't believe the warning. Maybe he thought Mark would keep quiet. Cue. But Mark hadn't. That same day, a new piece of footage, surface footage, no one had expected. A home video shot by a British freelance war photographer in 2004, later buried in his archives. The tape was rough, dusty, but in one 10-second clip, a man runs past the camera, ducking from gunfire. He's shouting in English, and he's holding something what looks like a small camera rig. The photographer zooms in just enough. For 2 frames, the man's face is visible. It's Wahlberg. The war photographer who shot the clip died in 2012. His family confirmed the footage was his. He told us his brother said that he once filmed someone famous during a real firefight, but he never said who. He was scared. The question now wasn't whether Wahlberg had been there, it was why. Had he volunteered? Had he been recruited, used, tricked? And who ordered the footage buried? That night, Colbert appeared briefly in a pre-recorded statement. He looked somber, serious. There were no jokes. I want to speak to something that happened on this stage, he said. When Mark Wahlberg made his comments, I didn't know how to react. I've been told for years that entertainment should stay light, stay funny. But if what he said is truth, maybe we're not just entertaining. Maybe we're part of something we never signed up for. Then, before the screen faded to black, he added one final line. Maybe the punchline has always been a cover. That clip, too, went viral. And somewhere in the shadows inside an intelligence facility whose name didn't appear on maps, a man in uniform watched it in silence. Then he picked up a phone. Activate protocol Mirafall, he said. Wahlberg's not a rogue anymore. He's a liability. The phone call lasted only 30 seconds, but it was enough. Orders were issued. Firewalls updated. A list of digital traces linked to Mark Wahlberg's private and professional life was compiled, scrubbed, and encrypted under Protocol Mirafall. His location became a national security asset. But by then, Wahlberg was already underground. No one knew where he had gone. Not his agents, not his family. He'd moved like a soldier burner phones. Cash-only stops, cold addresses. He'd done this before, years ago, in a different country, when he was told to disappear for the sake of American image control. Now, he wasn't hiding for the government, he was hiding from it. Back in Washington, the House Committee on Intelligence scheduled a closed-door hearing. Congresswoman Alina Ruiz submitted a classified witness list. Wahlberg's name was at the top, but she had no idea if he would ever show up. Meanwhile, Colbert's legal team fought a court order demanding they surrender the full, unedited footage of the interview. CBS resisted, claiming editorial independence. But federal pressure mounted. A week after the leak, something strange happened. An encrypted file appeared in the inboxes of 6 international journalists. Subject line read, "Walking backwards into the truth." The file contained what appeared to be raw audio logs, field reports, and partial satellite footage. One audio file stood out. A man's voice, calm but steady. This is Mark Wahlberg. Date, July 3rd, 2004. Location, Grid Alpha 7. This is for record. I was told we were documenting a story. I didn't know it was a mission. I didn't know. The villagers weren't targets, but I saw the aftermath. I carried a child out of rubble. I heard command say, "Clean frame only." That's when I knew. We weren't filming reality, we were filming denial. The world listened, and it didn't blink. Major networks tried to dismiss it as a generated, but experts authenticated the voice. And within hours, 3 former military contractors confirmed the recording's metadata. That voice was real, and so was Jericho. International outrage exploded. Pakistan's ambassador to the UN demanded an Emergency Security Council session. French media unearthed archived diplomatic cables from 2005 referring cryptically to a joint cultural camouflage operation gone off script. The phrase cultural camouflage trended worldwide. But the American public was divided. Some believed Wahlberg. They saw a man brave enough to speak against the machine. Others called him a traitor, accusing him of endangering national security. Talk radio hosts turned on him. Cable news panels debated whether actors should ever be allowed near war zones. Inside the intelligence community, fear was growing not of Wahlberg himself, but of what might come next. Because if Wahlberg had footage, others might too. That fear came true. A retired field medic in Montana uploaded a 48-second clip to an obscure war archive forum. The video was grainy, silent, but clear. It showed a camcorder view of burned-out buildings, children, soldiers, a voice in the background, Wahlberg shouting, "We need help," not a headline. It was undeniable. The Pentagon issued a second statement, this time less certain. There are reports under review regarding unauthorized civilian presence during high-risk operations. These incidents, if verified, do not reflect current defense policies. It was the first crack in the wall. Congresswoman Ruiz, now under heavy surveillance, reached out through encrypted channels. She recorded a message for Wahlberg. "Mark, if you can hear this, you are not alone. The truth matters. But you have to come forward officially. Without your testimony, they will erase everything again." He saw it, but he didn't respond. Instead, he contacted someone else, a war journalist named Maya Javed, who had lost her press credentials in 2006 after investigating a failed operation in Helmand. She hadn't been seen in years. Until now, he sent her a package. Inside was a small black USB drive and a note. "They lied to you. And to me, let's show them the real they buried." What Wahlberg had done was simple but devastating. Before the interview with Colbert, before the questions began, before the lights went on, he had synced his personal smartwatch with a recording module embedded in his cufflink. He recorded everything, including the backstage panic, the producers, orders, and the cut transmission feed. And on that USB drive was the entire unedited version of the interview. It revealed a back-channel voice in Colbert's earpiece telling him, "Mid interview, abort. Do not let him say Jericho. Shift 2, comedy, cut him off." Colbert hesitated, and Wahlberg said it anyway. The White House held its breath. President Anderson, up early and pacing, had already read the morning brief. Intelligence analysts reported over 12 million views of the leaked interview footage across decentralized platforms. The phrase cultural camouflage had entered academic debate, foreign press, and even late-night satire. But this wasn't satire anymore. In Brussels, the NATO Secretary General issued a quiet but firm statement. If a member nation has weaponized film production to mask military operations, we must review alliance ethics and cooperation agreements. The statement didn't name the U.S., but everyone knew who he meant. Inside a Senate conference room, cameras were prohibited. The bipartisan subcommittee on intelligence oversight had convened, and Wahlberg had been officially summoned. But Wahlberg wasn't in the room. Instead, he had submitted a sworn video testimony. It played on a secured screen in front of 14 senators. The lights dimmed, the room fell silent. "I understand what this looks like," Wahlberg began, seated, plainly in front of a black background. A movie star claiming to know state secrets. "But I didn't ask for this. I was told I was making a documentary. I was told the children we filmed were safe. And I believed them till the explosion, until the screaming." He paused, staring directly into the lens. I saw a drone strike hit a medical hut. The soldiers with me were furious. They hadn't called it in. It came from higher up. But the moment the dust settled, they were ordered to secure the scene and I was ordered to erase the footage. One senator shifted in his chair, uneasy. I didn't delete it, Wahlberg continued. I buried it. And for 18 years, I carried that silence, till someone asked me a stupid question on TV and I broke. The room stayed quiet. When the video ended, nobody clapped. Nobody moved. Meanwhile, outside, thousands gathered in the streets of Washington. D.C., some held signs. Truth isn't treason. Declassified Jericho. Filmmakers are not weapons. The protests were mostly peaceful and an unmarked SUV drove through a barricade and chaos broke out. 3 were injured. The driver was never found. In Los Angeles, Maya Javed, the exiled journalist who had released Wahlberg's archive, was now the most sought-after name in media. Major networks offered millions for interviews. She refused them all. Instead, she launched a new public database, JerichoFiles.org. It wasn't just Wahlberg's footage. Dozens of former intelligence officers, drone pilots, fixers, translators, and even one satellite analyst had uploaded declassified illegally downloaded materials related to covert operations worldwide, from Yemen to Libya, from Kandahar to Kharkiv. What tied them together wasn't just blood, it was silence. And now, the silence had cracked. One clip, just 12 seconds long, shook the internet the hardest. It showed a U.S. general face obscured, voice disguised saying to a film liaison officer, "We don't need another documentary. We need a distraction. Give them action scenes, explosions. A hero. We'll fill the truth in later." The Pentagon issued a statement. "We do not condone the manipulation of entertainment media for disinformation purposes." But they didn't deny the voice. At CBS Studios, panic turned to paranoia. Several producers were subpoenaed. A confidential report revealed that Wahlberg's interview had been altered under direct orders from a government communications liaison. The network's legal team denied any collaboration with intelligence agencies, but leaked emails suggested otherwise. One line in particular stood out. "He can promote the movie, but not the memory." Back in New York, Colbert returned to his desk for the first time in 2 weeks. He opened the show in silence. No music, no applause. Just him, seated looking directly into the camera. Sometimes we think comedy's armor, but sometimes it's just a distraction. I've spent years making jokes about power. Turns out, I was helping it. He paused. His voice cracked. When I asked Mark that question, I didn't know what he'd say. But once he said it, I was told to shut him down. And I did. He looked down. It's not because I believed in the system, but because I was scared of it. That clip trended instantly. #ColbertConfesses lit up the internet. Many praised him. Others said it was too late. But deep inside the Department of Defense, a darker discussion was happening. A group of senior officials reviewed a document titled Project Alibi. It proposed the construction of a legal firewall around entertainment-linked military operations. Section 12 proposed criminal prosecution of any civilian who willfully disseminates classified operation imagery under the guise of artistic expression. Maya's name was on the list. So was Wahlberg's. Congresswoman Ruiz went public immediately. They want to make truth a crime. We cannot allow it. The weekend arrived. Foreign embassies in D.C. were warned of possible cyber attacks. Several U.S. allies had begun quietly distancing themselves. Britain paused joint film military projects. Canada launched its own inquiry. And then came the biggest shock. A retired NATO commander in Belgium released a memo from 2006 titled Op Jericho Media Integration Strategy. In it, American film executives were listed as strategic partners. Mark Wahlberg's name appeared in the final line under the heading Asset Proven Embedded Civilian Narrative Control. It was no longer just about Wahlberg. It was about the weaponization of story itself. It was nearly midnight in Zurich when the private jet landed without lights. The runway was quiet, the fog dense, and the passenger list sealed. Inside the jet was Mark Wahlberg, exhausted, unshaven, and no longer hiding, just repositioning. The man who had once played heroes on screen was now caught in the role of a reluctant whistleblower. His face had been on more front pages in the past 2 weeks than in his entire film career. But what had started as a single televised confrontation had now triggered a global information war. He stepped off the jet into the arms of someone unexpected. Maya javed, the journalist he had trusted with the truth. They didn't hug. They just nodded. No words were needed. They knew what came next would be bigger than both of them. Across the ocean, chaos brewed. In Washington, a classified meeting was held in the West Wing basement. 5 men and 1 woman, all unnamed, in the visitor log discussed containment protocols. One of them, a senior intelligence advisor, leaned forward and said what others wouldn't. If we don't shut them down, we risk a global shift in information control. Governments are already losing the ability to define the narrative. The room went silent. Then came the order: deactivate the channel. By morning, JerichoFiles.org was offline. Every mirror, every backup, every re-upload wiped within seconds. It wasn't a DDoS, it was state-level code. Maya's laptop froze, then displayed a blinking red triangle. She pulled the battery out, too late. "We're burned," she whispered. Wahlberg didn't panic. He had expected this. What no one else knew was that Jericho Files wasn't just data. It was a map playered across hard copies, code fragments, and personal testimonies stored offline, hand-delivered to 10 people across 5 continents. Journalists, veterans, a school teacher in Bogota, a monk in Nepal. Each person held a single puzzle piece. Alone, meaningless. Together, undeniable. This wasn't just a leak. It was a failsafe. Still, the United States moved quickly. The Justice Department issued sealed indictments for Wahlberg and Maya under the Espionage Act, citing unauthorized release of classified operational material. Cable news turned instantly. The same networks that once admired Wahlberg now called him reckless, unstable, even anti-American. But something had shifted. In Germany, protests erupted outside the U.S. Embassy. Thousands held signs that read, "He told the truth. We saw the lies." A popular Middle Eastern news channel aired a 4-hour special comparing Wahlberg's footage to previously dismissed drone strike reports. Then another video surfaced. Not from Wahlberg, not from Maya, from a retired U.S. colonel named Reed Walker. In it, he sat beside a wall of medals, wearing no uniform. "I oversaw the Jericho mission," he began, "and I've been silent for 20 years. We used that operation to redirect public attention during a failed CIA maneuver in northern Pakistan. We staged a narrative, used a Hollywood crew as our shield. We let them believe it was fiction, used civilians as camouflage, and we got people killed." Video cut off mid-sentence. Within minutes, Colonel Walker was found dead in his Virginia home. Officially, cardiac arrest. Unofficially, it was too convenient. Wahlberg and Maya saw the news in Zurich. They didn't speak. They just moved faster. By that night, they met with an independent tribunal of international human rights lawyers. Evidence was presented not to media, not to politicians, but to archivists, historians, and former intelligence officers willing to testify under oath off-camera on neutral ground. The tribunal voted unanimously. Jericho was real. It was a human rights violation. A report was drafted for the UN Security Council. Maya held the only physical copy. It would be delivered by hand. But as she stepped into the car, a black SUV pulled across the road. Tires screeched. Men in civilian clothes approached. Wahlberg stepped out from the other side, holding up his. "Hands, take me," he said. "She has nothing." He didn't hesitate. He was pushed into the vehicle, blindfolded, gone in seconds. Maya didn't run. She didn't cry. She handed the report to the driver and said, "Go." That night, the world waited. The world had changed, but not in the way revolutions are usually measured. There were no parades in the streets, no treaties signed on global television, no speeches etched into marble. What happened instead was slower, deeper a shift in consciousness. The way people looked at a screen, read a headline, listened to a hero. Everything now carried a question mark. And still, Mark Wahlberg was gone. Weeks passed, rumors bloomed. A smuggled photograph showed a man in Eastern Europe wearing dark glasses with a slight limp and a heavy coat. Analysts debated if it was him. Some said he was dead. Others whispered of a deal made in secret, a quiet exile in exchange for silence. But Maya Javed knew better. She had received a single message. No name, no signal. Just 5 words. The lens is still rolling. She didn't need more. In the meantime, the world moved forward. The Jericho Tribunal report, though never publicly read at the UN, was leaked in full by a Scandinavian nonprofit. It revealed coordinated collaboration between elements of the U.S. Department of Defense, private film studios, and foreign contractors. Pages detailed how media manipulation was tested not only in conflict zones, but also in domestic newsrooms, segments of interviews. Prescripted by reputation consultants to serve as soft propaganda. And Colbert's name was in the report not as an architect, but as a controlled asset. He had been flagged as compliant through humor. His final act walking away became something of a cultural legend. A performance of resistance. Too late for many, but not forgotten. In Los Angeles, an independent film collective began reconstructing the Jericho footage piece by piece. From the clips stored offline across the globe, they weren't making a documentary. They were building a counter-narrative. One that didn't rely on polished soundtracks or box office stats. It's just raw truth. When the teaser dropped 30 seconds of grainy combat footage over Wahlberg's whispered line, they asked me to pretend it broke every record for a non-profit release. Hollywood didn't know what to do. Studios quietly canceled several defense-funded action projects. Producers who once joked about working with the Pentagon now deleted those remarks from interviews. Behind closed doors, the industry scrambled to distance itself from what it had become. Not just entertainment, but cover. And across the ocean, more testimonies began to surface. A South African cameraman revealed he was hired to simulate battlefield chaos for a training exercise in 2007. Only to discover his footage aired on national television as real war coverage. A British news anchor confessed on air that she had been handed scripts about unconfirmed foreign aggression before. Her country entered a trade war. The patterns weren't new. They were just suddenly visible. And Maya, she disappeared again. Her last published piece was titled "The Frame Within the Frame." In it, she wrote, "We used to believe that truth was a matter of evidence. But truth is also what we are allowed to witness. They made war look like cinema, so we would consume it, not question it. But the moment an actor stepped off script, reality broke in. And it hasn't left since." The article became required reading in universities from London to Karachi. But the U.S. government never issued an apology. Instead, it changed the language. Jericho was officially reclassified as a domestic security incident involving misinformation. That term, misinformation, became the new firewall. It allowed them to suppress, to delete, to monitor. But it didn't stop the leak. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the Colbert interview, something strange happened. Every digital billboard in Times Square glitched for 6 seconds. Then, without warning, the screens lit up with a single looping video. It showed Wahlberg seated in the desert, behind him a collapsed village. He speaks, softly. You can hide the cameras. You can cut the feed, but the reel keeps spinning. Someone's still watching. Then the screens went dark. No group claimed credit. No one traced the source, but the message was clear. Mark Wahlberg had become more than a headline, more than an actor, more than even a whistleblower. He had become a signal, proof that in a world of curated narratives, controlled laughter, and profitable distractions, there is still danger in asking one unfiltered question: what really happened when the cameras were off? And someone, somewhere, is still rolling.